Loretta Ledesma, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you. You're someone I've been wanting to talk to for a long time, and we tried to schedule something a while ago, but stars have finally aligned. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I was super sad when it didn't work out last year, but so much has changed over the
Hmm.
years, so it kind of feels more in alignment now.
Perfect. I believe in divine timing. These things are supposed to happen when they're meant to, and clearly it's supposed to happen now.
Yes.
So let's get into it. Normally, I would ask all kinds of gentle questions to ease us into the topic, but you are very upfront about the things you're interested in and the kind of
Mhm.
magic that you make. So I'm just going to dive right into the deep end and say your title, your honorific, your
Mhm.
moniker is the Death Witch. Ooh, so powerful. So how did you come upon this way of addressing yourself?
So, in the traditions that I work in, the word witch has a bit of a different definition, understanding in our community outside of the term witch now that we all as a collective understand. Um, Part of that is that I work from both hands. I'm a two-headed worker. I am just as comfortable doing blessing work, abundance work, um, as I am doing justified balancing of the scales.
Ooh.
So, yeah, so I very comfortably lean into the word witch. Um, and it is something that it's a little taboo in the traditions that I work in. And oh, my cat just jumped on my goat.
That is maybe the most perfect thing you could have possibly said. Okay, yes. For the
Um,
people, some people are going to be watching this on YouTube and some people are only going to be listening to this. So, for the people who are only listening, can you please describe what is happening behind you?
I
I see
have
a
a
hairless cat.
yeah. So my cat Mo is hairless, and I have a full-size taxidermied black goat behind me.
Yes, a very Black
And
Phillip.
yeah, so my cat just jumped on top of my goat's back.
Amazing. Amazing. Is Mo, would you consider Mo a familiar?
He is, I would consider him a familiar in training.
I like it. Okay, very
Yeah,
good. Very good.
yeah,
Well, Mo is jumping into the magic circle. I hear Mo meowing in the background. Mo wants some
yeah.
attention. Mo wants us to know that Mo is present.
Mo is very present right now.
It's perfect. This is like the ultimate podcast for Mo to make maybe their debut. I don't know what Mo's pronouns are, but
Definitely his debut.
I love it. I love it. Welcome, Mo. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. So you were talking about some of the traditions you work in, and I'd love for you to elaborate on that.
So I started my journey into witchcraft at a really, really young age. I started out learning more of like a traditional brujeria.
Mm-hmm.
And through my first teacher, I learned about Santa Muerte and working with her as a very large spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Doña Maria passed, I started to work and train under elders in conjure.
Okay.
Hoodoo, rootwork, and conjure are kind of somewhat interchangeable words for this tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a guest at this table, meaning that it's not an ancestral tradition. but being a guest is something that I take very, very seriously. Um, and it's an honor to be invited into as much as possible, this particular tradition. So those are the two main things that I do.
Beautiful. Can we talk about the brujeria? Is that a tradition you were raised with, or did that come to you later in life?
So it came into my life when I was around 14. My sister was killed when I was 12.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um, yeah, it was a very strange time in my life. My sister was a flight attendant and she was killed in a plane crash.
Mm, mm.
And it was very public. It made international news. So as a family in our grieving process, we didn't really have a lot of privacy. There were literally like reporters on our front lawn. Um, so I struggled with that for a really long time. And part of that struggle was being kind of a rebellious kid. And I started ditching school a bunch. And I came across a woman in my neighborhood when I was walking around when I should have been in school but wasn't.
Where was this?
I went to, at the time I was at Skinner Middle School in Denver.
Mhm, mhm.
And she I would see her doing things on the porch, sweeping in ways that didn't look the way that like my parents swept the house,
Yep.
burning things. She would be outside with rattles, and being a kid who didn't really like understand boundaries with strangers, I asked her like, "What are you doing?" And she was aware that I should have been in school also. So
Mhm.
she told me that she wouldn't answer any questions between this time and this time. Um, so it got me back to school and
Wow.
yeah. So from that point I started to, go to her porch, talk to her. Um, and she was willing to answer some questions, but she also made it really clear that like this relationship couldn't really develop. I was a kid. She needed to know my parents. So I ended up introducing her and my dad was like, okay, like if this is what is going to feel better to you, if this is going to help you in some way, all right, go ahead.
Oh, what a good dad.
Yeah,
I
he was
mean,
great.
really, obviously I don't know the details of your relationship, but in that gesture, what a gift of like acceptance and encouragement. Because I could imagine some parents being like, "You're gonna do what with
Yeah,
who?" So I
yeah.
really admire that he was open to this.
He was like truly one of the best examples of humanity that I've ever experienced.
Mm,
And he actually inspires a lot of the work that I do today. So I'm really
oh,
grateful.
how beautiful. Is he still with us on this side?
No, he passed when I was 18.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So he's
Yeah.
watching over you and working with you, perhaps, or
Oh yeah.
definitely.
He definitely walks with me.
How beautiful. So you started working with this bruja?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my Yeah, I didn't quite understand like the different languages around, these different terms. I didn't know necessarily what a witch was. I didn't
Mhm.
know what witchcraft necessarily was. So as I was learning, it really was like very informal. Like we would
Mhm.
sit on her living room floor or on the porch, and it started with like plant identification. And then it moved
Yep.
to here are these tools. Pour it like an oil, for example, these largely manufactured oils, which is what was available at the time.
Sure.
Pour this out in a bowl and tell me what's magical about this. Why does this work? And I couldn't figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
And that was actually the point, was that there's this thing, this tool that's been named a magical tool. You don't see the heart in it, so how can you add heart into something that's been named?
Oh, I love that. What a beautiful way of putting it. Ah,
Yeah.
so you were kind of an apprentice, it sounds like, for a few years or for a certain time of your life?
Yeah, it was a few years. She passed when I was around, I was 16.
Mhm.
So it was only a couple of years. And she was elderly. Was she wouldn't have called herself an immigrant, but she was from Mexico.
Mhm.
Um, and she was really generous with her knowledge and experience.
Wow. And it sounds like that may have been fortifying for you at a time when you were grieving and feeling a little bit at sea.
Oh, absolutely. When I say that this work has saved my life, I mean that quite literally. I don't know who I would be today if I hadn't been a nosy kid.
Yes. Oh, and so you said that's part of your tradition, and then you also eventually sort of evolved into more of a conjure practice. How did that begin for you?
So, interestingly, kind of s somewhat similarly,
Someone was sweeping on a porch.
yeah. Um, I came across Professor Porterfield, who is my elder and teacher,
Mhm.
um, his work, and I found his radio show, and I was I would listen, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna reach out," and I got this idea to just reach out and kinda be annoying,
Yeah.
and I was able to get a response, and it was like, "I'm gonna do readings, I'm going to, like, seek mentorship," um, and then I got a crazy idea. So that it started that way, like a very traditional.
Yeah, were you still a teenager at this point, or did that come a little later?
That came a little later. I
Okay.
was so between Donna Maria and Professor Porterfield, I was really studying on my own, trying to work on my own, and by this time, I had found peers who were also interested in the work.
Yes.
So it was kind of like loosely, we would sit around and read books and try different things together and see how it all worked out.
Yeah, I often say that your coven can be like a book club, just a little bit
Yeah,
more fun.
yeah,
Because,
absolutely.
so many of us are self-taught or we're
Mhm.
autodidacts, we're seekers, and so many of us love to read and love to seek out our own path. So, yeah, it sounds like that's kind of what you were doing.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I really love about this work, is that so much of it truly is community based.
Mhm.
Um, and it brings people together that might not normally have found each other. So
Oh,
there's the magic in that in itself.
yes, exactly, exactly. It's so powerful when you find the others, as Timothy Leary famously said.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're listening to this radio show and you're like, wait, I have to study with this guy. I'm going to make a nuisance of myself until he takes me under his wing. Is that kind of how it went down?
Yeah, pretty much. And, lucky for me, the professor was very open to talking with me, and, it turned more into like sharing information.
Hmm.
And I think that, in a way, he probably felt maybe a little bit sorry for me too, because he's like, okay, this person is like super interested, but they lost that foundation.
Yes.
Um, so he took me on.
And
And
just for people who haven't heard his name before, I think it's come up on the show before. Interestingly, it came up in
mm,
conversation just this week with somebody else for me, just in my personal life. Can you talk a little about his orientation? What style of magical practitioner is he?
so he is an old-timey hoodoo man. He lives in Texas. He's
Mhm.
very open about living in a small town in Texas. And he actually started training when he was really, really young also. His mother was a root worker, and his neighbor when he was growing up was also a root worker. So
Wow.
he started training very, very young. Charles Hanson was his teacher.
Mm.
So the way that our lineage works is like, yes, me and my siblings in the lineage are in the Professor Porterfield lineage, but really we're in the lineage of his teacher,
Mhm.
which I know can be a little bit like it's kind of tricky. There's a lot to track there, um, but he is like Old Testament, very, very traditional cartomancer, root worker, um, like traditional in the no pun intended root of it, but like to where he still has clients that pay him in like chickpeas, you know?
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is he's highly community based.
Mhm.
He is extremely community focused, even though he might not use that terminology himself.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And were you in the same physical location or was this remote study?
It was always remote
Mhm.
until I was able to convince him to come out here and do the Conjure Gala.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, we'll get to the Conjure Gala, but I want to just set a little bit more of a foundation for our listeners and our viewers. If someone were to go to your website now,
Mhm,
they would mostly find these oils and incenses and I believe bath salts and
mhm,
things of that nature that you create. And I understand you also teach, you do consultancies of all kinds in the
mhm,
realm of spirit and magical work. Um, but it seems like a primary focus for you is offering magical materials, magical
mhm.
items, and accoutrement for people and presumably to help people, correct? Is that how you'd
Yeah,
classify it?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I was going through some of the items that you have in your shop. And I told you this before we started recording, and this is one of the reasons I was really excited and like intrigued to talk to you because I'm usually like out here in these streets being like, witches are not all dark and scary. I'm the kind of witch, I don't hex people as a
Mhm,
matter of ethics. I believe in like banishings and I believe in bindings and protection magic, but like I'm not out here trying to hex anybody. I'm not out here trying to control anybody. And you are very open that yes, some of the things you are offering is you know, right hand path. And some of
mhm,
the things you're offering are what we'd call left hand path, maybe.
mhm.
That's kind of a clumsy classification. I realize that left is not always malefic, but you know what I mean. There's some shadow items that you
Yeah.
offer. And
Mhm,
if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of dig into that, not to in any way like challenge you, just so I have a better understanding and our listeners have a better understanding of the kind of work that you do. Um,
yeah.
and maybe we could use some of your items as examples. So, one of the items you have is King Solomon oil, which is about
Mhm.
gaining wisdom. And then you also have an oil called bend over oil, which is about getting someone to do what you want. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a tool for command control and for bending someone's will.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I'm just gonna like my listeners know that that makes me feel uncomfortable. Like
yeah,
I'm just like,
yeah.
ugh, like I don't want to control anybody.
Hmm.
Um, and yet I am very open to hearing why you think that that has value and why you feel at peace with offering something like that.
Yeah. So, and it's a very, I think it's good for people to feel uncomfortable. And I think that it's wise to feel uncomfortable because if we're too comfortable with that type of work, then we're not actually balancing the scales. We're not actually exercising justice. We are diving into work that is only self-serving.
Right.
So I do think it's good for people to question why, before I put this in the cart, what are my, as much as I don't like the word intentions, what are my intentions with this tool?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, One of the reasons that it is important to have these tools available to us is because as we're experiencing right now in this time and space that we're all in, sometimes we enter into situations where the footing isn't equal. And sometimes we find ourselves in places that we wouldn't be heard, taken seriously. The the books are stacked up against us and it's unjust.
Mhm.
So then we lean in, we have the opportunity when it's justified to lean into spiritual tools that can help balance the scales.
I want to pause you here because this is a point that people have brought up to me in the past, which is that, you know, listen, I think as someone in a feminine body, already
Mhm.
justice is kind of tipped against us. You know, how many women are assaulted or worse and then not believed, for example, just one example. But I also understand, like, I'm in a white body. And so a lot of the tools of quote unquote justice from like a government standpoint or mainstream justice, they will statistically be kinder to somebody with my skin tone than a lot of other people's. And so I also understand, like, I might have the privilege of not needing or not thinking I need some of these things, whereas other folks from other communities are like, we're dealing with systemic racism here. Like, we need some other tools, right? Um, is that a point that you think about sometimes too?
It's that point is like truly the driving force behind all of my work.
Hmm.
Um, we the foundation that this country was even built on was is leaned in a direction that is,
White supremacist.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I don't like truly there is nothing that I create, even, love oil, prosperity oil, happy home, um, success. There's not a single thing that I create that isn't with that in mind.
Hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, for example, if I'm going to look at an apartment or if I'm filling out a job application and by law we have to write out all of our information. We have to write out our last name.
Mhm.
Um and I might be looked over even though I'm equally qualified or even more so qualified for that job or for that apartment. But if I dress it with a little bit of success oil and dress myself with a little bit of prosperity oil. And then I dab in each corner of the application or on the screen as I'm filling out an application with some bend over oil. Then that is going to give me the edge that I need to just be on equal footing for that apartment or that job.
Mm. So it's not necessarily about harming someone else in your mind. Or
In my
maybe
mind,
it is. Yeah, but I shouldn't put words in your mouth. Please, please go ahead.
I think that I mean, I think someone who might be racist may consider that them being harmed by that. Um, but in my mind, it's all about justified working. And, if we were going to dive into something where it's like, okay, now I'm going to use bend over oil to in a working where I'm going to work someone else. Perfect example is um, several years ago, someone who's really close to me was in a car accident. They had to go through litigation. It was a whole thing, right? And they started to get by the recommendation of their attorney, they started to see a chiropractor.
Mm,
Important work, right? It's part
mhm,
of healing.
mhm,
And then as they were getting closer to their case being completed, their lawyers started to get these really like overly priced bills for that
okay.
chiropractic work.
Huh.
And the chiropractor wasn't willing through the conversation between the lawyer and the chiropractor's office. The chiropractor wasn't willing to make changes to make the bill fair.
Mhm,
So I did some divination on it. You always want to divine and you always want to check in to make sure that the work is justified before you do it. Through my divination, the work was justified.
mhm.
So I did do work on the chiropractor with bend over work to force them to correct the bill.
I also have to say, just like literarily speaking, the idea of doing a bend over oil on a chiropractor just delights me to no end.
Yeah.
And did it work?
It did.
How fabulous. How fabulous. I want to highlight also this oil you've done in collaboration with someone, and I'd love to hear about the collaboration. It's called Justified Oil. This is by yourself, the Death Witch, and Chaotic Witch Aunt. And I'm actually going to read some of what you both wrote here. It's an oil that asks, what is justified? What is justice? What is revolution, change, and unbinding from systems of harm? How can we release these structures? And how do we find the bravery to birth something new? Exactly. Exactly. So tell me about this oil and justice work because I'm trying to really parse out in my own practice justice magic, justice witchcraft that still feels in alignment with my own code of ethics. So tell me about this oil.
So Frankie, who is someone that I absolutely adore. I highly, highly respect their work. They work in Italian American witchcraft, folk
Mhm,
magic.
mhm,
Um, they and I started to go to a lot of protests together and started to really work together in the physical world on like what can we do, this. And it started really in conversation about like, okay, we went to this protest, there was some interesting like things that were going on, um possibly bad actors, and but what else could we have done, like what could we lay down while we're there.
mm,
So we started prepping before going to these actions where we were like, okay, we're going to do some playing card work. We're going to do some blends with different herbs and dirts that we're going to lay down as we go. And then we were like, why don't we put this in an oil? Like, this is what we both do. Frankie is also just a brilliant oil maker.
Mm.
So it was like a natural connection there with our spiritual work and the work that we do physically here in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So there was there was a lot of divining before we decided on ingredients, and different dirt to put in the oil, because we do work in different traditions that they do have a lot of intersection though.
Sure.
So we both applied around the same time for the Salem Witch Fest. And as it turned out, we were both teaching classes on justice magic, through our different traditional lenses. So from there, that oil was born. Um,
And how do you
it's
recommend somebody use it?
so because it was really kind of formulated around playing cards, working with playing cards and anointing the oil on the playing card that you choose, and waking up that card and working that card is a great and also tricky way to work in while you're in space.
Mm-hmm.
Playing cards can be tucked, hidden, buried really easily because they're so thin.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of container work. For a lot of people, that stops at like bottles or jars. But I really encourage people to look at different like fruits and vegetables as options for containers also.
Ooh.
So for example, in a lot of traditions, apples are worked for love, but in my tradition, apples are also worked for like death and
Mm.
cursing,
Mm.
because apples are sacred to the dead. So an apple is a really easy thing, and it's very people aren't suspicious. Maybe after this podcast they will be, but people aren't usually suspicious of apples.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to say, wake up an apple, work it for justice, work it for um, the action that you're going to, the protest you're going to, and you were to put a little bit of that oil inside the apple, you could take that apple with you to a protest or even just at a place of interest and put it there.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be very, very not alarming.
Here's what I like about this language for me. I'm speaking 100% personally. The word justice to me feels like it's out of my hands in terms of how that's going to happen. And I get nervous when people try and take justice into their own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I am the type of person, and again, speaking for myself, where I'm like, I don't want to decide to harm somebody
Mm-hmm.
actively. Even
Yeah.
even the worst person in the world,
Mm-hmm.
I I personally don't want to be responsible for harm coming to them. I do feel comfortable conjuring justice.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what I mean? Like I like that's my own comfort level. And because I don't know. Again, first of all, I just don't, just on principle, don't. I understand if there's, and here we could like parse this all day. I know I hear it already in my head where I'm like, I believe in defending myself, and then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if people are being violent against you or your community, like, where do we draw the line between self-defense and going on the offense? But I'm just telling you, for me, energetically, like, I believe in like fortifying and protecting the people I love and conjuring justice, and
Yeah.
however that's going to happen, but not necessarily being the one who's saying this is how it should happen. Does that make sense?
It does. And, that's generally that's exactly what you'll hear from responsible workers.
Mhm.
I personally, that's why divination of some sort is so important to me before I do any type of work that is malefic.
Mhm.
Um, and if it's too close to me, I'll go to a colleague that I trust or my elder. And my general kind of rule just for myself is that if it's not going to matter 5 years from now, then I don't need to do the work on it.
Mhm.
And sometimes when we release the things that are more just annoyances or frustrations, as opposed to like, this is actually causing me harm, when we release them to spirit, spirit will handle it.
Mhm.
If we're doing our ancestor work, if we're up on our offerings, if we're, you know, real with our spiritual maintenance, a lot of the times those things will get handled. Spirit, our ancestors, spirits of the land.
Yep.
And then we don't really need to spend so much energy on that.
Yep. I want to be really careful with what I'm about to ask you for for both of our sakes.
Mhm.
But let's just fucking say it. We're in a crazy time. This
Mhm.
country, I mean, injustice has always been part of this country. White supremacy has always been part of this country's history. Oppression has always been part of this country's history. There's also great things about America. I love
Yeah.
this country, but let's be honest. And yet, I would offer that, at least to me and my limited worldview, this seems like an accelerated time of oppression, of white
Mhm.
supremacy, of authoritarianism. We see what ICE is doing and what's happening to
Mhm.
immigrants. I mean, we see what's happening to all kinds of people who do not fit this very narrow profile of straight, white, usually male, usually
Mhm.
wealthy,
Yep.
usually church going or pretending to be.
Mhm.
Um, and so everybody else who is not fitting that profile right now, I mean, like, I'm not making this up, like, are under threat. Like, there are
Yeah.
real statements being made publicly by this administration.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm just wondering, like, how you're thinking about magic in this time and how it can be supportive, but also still be responsible and ethical.
Yeah. So ethics are something that I think about almost every day because I realize that the ethics that I was raised with don't necessarily apply today.
Hmm.
And that's something that is actually pretty heartbreaking to me. Um, I was raised and my parents like fully believed in this place. They always told me, and it's part of like there's an ancient Iranian religion, and the words of Zoroaster were good thoughts, good deeds, good actions, right?
Mhm.
And I really believed that growing up, and my parents really, really believed that. And it's heartbreaking to me that that isn't necessarily true today. So the idea of ethics is something that I feel like I almost have to be willing to change day to day.
Hmm.
Normally under what, quote unquote normal conditions, I would say, you know, we can lean into our ancestors and we can trust that guidance. We can lean into what we've been taught and we can trust that. And it's hard to come to terms with the idea that we're not fighting a fair fight anymore,
Mm,
and we're not fighting against, there's never been like equal rights, right?
sure.
But we were, for a long time there, I really believed that we were on a path towards that. So when I go downstairs into my lab and my workspace and my altar room, I'm faced with, this isn't just about a client or my community needing just judge work, because most people don't even, who are finding themselves wrapped up in these ICE operations, don't even make it to the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So ethically, I have to be willing, in the sake of for the sake of community care, to say, okay, you know what? As opposed to that, I might have to fuck up someone's day. And if that is someone who is overstepping or overreaching in what they're doing, then that person might have to have a really bad day so that they can't cause harm to innocent community members and people who are just trying to live.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, and you don't have to answer this, but the rhetorical question is like, how bad of a day are you trying to give somebody? You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
where I just and again, please, like I'm only speaking for myself. But I'm like, I don't want to turn into the thing
Mhm.
that I find so, and I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm just saying how
Yeah.
I think about it. Like, I don't, there's that Audre Lorde quote, and forgive me, I'm going to probably say it a little bit wrong, but it's like, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Yep.
Like, it's like, if you become a violent person
Mhm.
in order to defend what you think is right, you're then just turning into like the mirror image or the shadow of like the thing that you think is so wrong. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. These are the kind of things I think about, and the questions I'm asking and the decisions I'm making about how I comport myself, not just in the magical space, but just like in the world, in
Yeah.
terms of the messages I'm putting out on social media, just all of that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And not to only be like love and light and spiritual bypassy either.
Right.
I don't know. That's just sort of like how I'm thinking about this stuff. But
Yeah,
I
I
really
mean,
appreciate your perspective.
I think it's important to, for those of us who do engage in this type of work, to remember that if we allow ourselves to fall into the the deepest places that we can, then we're doing our work, we're doing their work for them. And there is a big difference between causing confusion and purposely causing people to
Get
not be able to show up to
right.
work,
Right.
not be able to find the documents that they need, to be able to go after someone. Those messages get crossed. Um, and causing harm in a way that can never be restored. I know that this work can do that. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it, and
Mm-hmm.
I've witnessed that. And in that, I think it's so, so important for us to remember also. I hear all these folks, and I get it, right? Like, I get the like, oh, burn it all down. I understand where that comes from, but the thing that I think about is, but we're still here. We're still in it.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in these communities. So when we're saying burn it all down, we're talking about us too.
Right.
And yes, there's systems that need to be dismantled, and there's people that are in power that should not be. But we have to be willing to do the work of building simultaneously.
That's what I'm all about. It's like creation over
Yeah.
destruction. And I understand you have to
Mhm.
sometimes, clean out your closet or whatever. I get it in order to make room for the new thing. But I'm also like, I do see some folks online
Mhm.
who are like, and I understand it's coming from a place of like frustration and despair and fear.
Mhm.
Um, but I do see them who are definitely like, you know, middle fingers to the sky, like wanting
Mhm.
to, act out and be harmful. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Ooh," like for me, I'm like, "Ooh, you're not helping."
Yeah. No, I fully agree with that, and I think that it's one of the reasons that the spiritual work right now is super, super important, because if you can take it to your altar and you can take that frustration and that anger and that fear, especially the fear, and you can lay it down with spirit, then you can take a breath
Yeah.
and you can look outside and you can look into your community and you can remind yourself of all the really important and good and solid things that are happening around us. And if we can get away from our phones for a little bit, and I'm not saying, don't pay attention to what's happening, but truly, it is so important to fortify communities and to not just build, like participate in your community.
Yeah.
Then you give yourself the chance to see that this really is all so worth saving.
Yes. That's it. That's it. You write, pretty regularly on your Instagram, speak love into people every chance you get. It's showed up on a few of your posts. And so I also want to just make sure people know that, like, yes, you're the death witch. And
Mhm.
yes, you have Spider Queen oil on your website, but you also, I think, are orienting from a place of great love and a sense
Yeah.
of protection. And this isn't just about, like, yeah, like you said, being destructive. And, some people I think really glamorize like the shadow stuff and,
Mhm.
left-handed magic and malefic magic. And you're like, that's not where you're coming from with this,
Yeah.
right?
No, not at all. In fact, I approach everything from a place of like ferociously loving my community.
Mm,
And and I feel like it's really, really important to like think about what love really is and what that means to you and how you do speak that into people. It's one thing to tell people, I love you, you're my friend, but it's another thing to show up.
yes.
And I've watched people who have felt alone and who have felt very unloved. And I've watched people make decisions based on that. And in my mind, it's been a lost opportunity.
Mm,
And sorry, I'm feeling a little emotional
yeah.
with everything that's going on in the world and in this country that we have. My husband and myself are first generation. Our parents are immigrants.
Hmm.
That we truly have like this privilege of experiencing. There's so much more that we all have to offer this place. And there's so many more ways that we can show up for each other and love each other. And yes, I understand that we can't love our way through this administration only, but that really does have to be at the front and center of even our justified work.
That's it right there. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. You brought up earlier Santa Muerte. I'm conscious of the fact that this episode is going to be airing around Samhain, Day of the Dead, Halloween, take your pick. You know, I mean, it's become almost cliche at this point to say this is the time when the veil between worlds is thinnest. I have to put on my like ooh voice. But it really is this very tender, holy
Mhm.
time of honoring our ancestors. And so I'd love to invite you to talk about how you think of this time of year and perhaps what kind of magic we might conjure, particularly this year, this moment.
Yeah. Um, this is my favorite time of year.
Yes.
It's when I feel, perhaps ironically, the most alive.
That makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, contemplating death often makes one really appreciate getting to have a body and feel things and be in the material world for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a privilege,
Yes.
this life and to be alive. And, you know, I honestly, I'm 46 and I didn't imagine at the time that my sister was killed, I did not imagine that I would outlive her. Like I'm twice as old as she was when she passed.
Yeah.
So I wake up every morning with the awareness that I'm so, so grateful to be alive. So this time of year, and especially this year, leaning into our ancestors who have done this before.
Yes.
All of us, it's one thing that I really, really want people to remember is that somewhere in your lineage, somewhere in your ancestry, there is there are multiple people who have seen this and who have done this before.
Yeah.
Talk to them, you know, lay down water and offerings and light a candle for them and be still and listen because that support and those messages are there. And Santa Muerte, who you'll see her often carrying the scales, she is such a champion for the underdog. She is such a champion for communities and for people who are overlooked and are harmed. Um, and she accepts us all because we will all die. So right now, as and I personally I believe that the veil is always thin. However, there's this spirit that has been built around this time of year, and this spirit directs that we have more access now. So make your ancestors a meal, invite them in, ask them for guidance, ask them for protection. Your ancestors are your first line of defense.
Yeah.
Ask them to remind you when you feel like there's no hope. Ask them to remind you that through their hope and their pushing, you're here.
That's right.
And Santa Muerte, for me, she's showed up shortly after my sister was killed, and she's so loud. She speaks so loud, and she shows up in the most tangible ways. She is she's there for us all to remind us not only that she'll be there to meet us when we die and to make sure that we have a an easeful and peaceful transition, but also to remind us that this world, this life, this place it is sacred, and this is all worth fighting for. She's here to remind us of the way. She carries the scythe. She'll she's there to help us clear out some of this debris so that we can pave new roads, so that we can open new roads, so that we can do the road opening magic, and in that close some roads. If you can open roads, you can close roads. You can say, I don't want any more of this in my community. I want this instead.
Yes. Oh, I feel like you're someone that I could speak to for 7 days straight. Out of respect for your time and energy, we need to wrap things up. But thank you so much for those incredibly wise words. I needed to hear it. I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching will need to hear that too. And I just appreciate you so much. In our final moments together, people are definitely going to want to get some of your oils and other magical items. I'm sure they're going to want to learn more from you and perhaps even work with you. What is the best way for people to connect with the Death Witch?
I'm pretty available on email. My Instagram is at the Death Witch. My website is thedeathwitch.black. That just happened to be what was available.
Perfect. Perfect. I love it.
I will be vending in person at the Salem Night Fair, the 24th and 25th of October. And I'll actually be working in the shop that I own in Salem for most of October. Um,
So you own a shop and you live elsewhere. Is that right?
yeah, so I co-own the Cauldron Black in Salem. The other owner does live there, so I do a lot of things remotely and I travel back and forth.
Oh, very, very, very cosmopolitan.
Yeah, just fancy.
I love a fancy witch. Well, Loretta, this has been really educational, insightful, illuminating, inspiring. I really hope that this is the first of many conversations that you and I will have, whether on or off mic. Until then, thank you so much for being on the Witch Wave and Blessed Samhain.
Thank you. This has been a really also needed conversation. I appreciate you.